Hello everyone, welcome to Learn with Wasim. This is Muhammad Wasim Khan, an instructor of your project planning and management course. I hope you all are doing well. As you know, in the previous lectures, we have discussed some of the important processes of the project schedule management, like identifying the activities, preparing their activities list, and then drawing a sequence and identifying the relationship between different activities. Today, we are going to discuss one of the most important processes of the project schedule management, and that is develop the schedule. So, develop schedule is the process of analyzing activity sequences, durations, resource requirements, and schedule constraints to create the project schedule. So, develop schedule is actually it is a process in which we analyze different activity sequences, their durations, their resource requirements, and schedule constraints to create the project schedule model. By entering the schedule activities, durations, resources, resource availabilities, and logical relationships into the scheduling tool, it generates a schedule model with planned dates for completing project activities. Okay, so the schedule model is used to determine the planned start and finish dates for project activities and milestone based on the accuracy of inputs. So the schedule model is used to determine actually the planned, the starting and the finishing dates for each and every activity of the project. The schedule development can measure or it can require the review and revision of duration estimates and resource estimates to establish an approved project schedule that can serve as a baseline to track the progress. So let's talk about some of the inputs, tools, and techniques and the outputs of developed schedule process. The inputs include a schedule management plan, activity list, activity attributes, project schedule network diagrams, activity resource requirements, resource calendars, activity duration estimates, project scope statement, and all of the above eight inputs we have discussed in the previous lecture. So we are not going to discuss those inputs here. Similarly, we have discussed the resource breakdown structure, environmental enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. Again, we are not going to discuss these inputs because we have discussed these different inputs many times in the previous lectures. And obviously, we have discussed the risk register briefly. We will discuss in details in the risk management chapter and lectures. And you know that the risk register provides the details of all the identified risks and the responses to those risks. In the project staff assignments, it actually specifies which resources are assigned to each activity. So let's talk about the tools and techniques. The first tool and technique that we can use for developing the schedule is schedule model network analysis. Schedule network analysis is actually a technique that generates the whole project schedule model. It employs different tools or techniques such as critical path method, critical chain method, what if analysis, and resource optimization techniques to calculate the early and late start and finish dates for the uncompleted portions of the project activities. So in schedule network analysis, we actually analyze the whole project schedule model and we use different techniques such as the critical path method, critical chain method, what if analysis, and resource optimization techniques to calculate the early and late starts and finish dates. Let's talk about the critical path method. So critical path method is used to estimate the minimum project duration and determine the amount of the scheduling flexibility on the logical network paths within the schedule model. So in critical path method, we actually try to find out or can the critical path within a particular project. And the activities that actually lie on the critical path are called the critical activities. This technique actually calculates the early start, early finish, late start, and late finish dates for all the activities without regard for any resource limitation by performing a forward and backward pass analysis. And we will discuss those forward and backward pass analysis in the coming lectures. The third, another important terminology that we have discussed in the previous slide as well, and that is the critical path. And critical path is actually the sequence of activities that represent actually the longest path to the project and which determines the shortest possible project duration. The resulting, so the critical path is actually, it actually the sequence different activities and identify the path that actually is the longest path in a project and the shortest possible, shortest time, path of a project. So we will discuss the critical path in the coming slides in different examples, and you will, I hope, understand it more easily. The resulting early and the date start and finish dates are not necessarily the project schedule, rather they actually indicate the time periods within which the activity could be executed using the parameters entered in the schedule model. So let's talk about the float. Float or slack is actually the amount of time by which an activity can be delayed without delaying the early start date of any immediate successor activity and project completion date. So it actually is the amount of time by which an activity can be delayed without delaying the dates of any other activity or the whole project. So float is represented by the late start minus early start or a late finish minus early finish. So we can have these two expressions. The first, one of the expression is in front of you, which is float is equal to late start minus early start. But another one is float is equal to late finish minus early finish. So we can use both of these expressions for identifying the float or slack of different activities. So on any network path, the schedule flexibility is measured by the positive difference between the early dates and late dates, and that is called the total float. Critical paths have either a zero or a negative total float. And the schedule activities on a critical path are the critical activities as we have discussed in the previous slide. Once the total float for a network path has been calculated, then the free float can also be determined. Now let's talk about the example, and please focus on this and give complete attention to this particular example so that you can understand it easily. You can see, or we have different activities here, that is activity A, B, C, and D. For activity A, the duration of activity is 5, duration of activity B is 5, duration of activity C is 10, and duration of activity D is 15. So we can have two paths. One path is A, B, and D, like A, B, and D, this path. And the second path is A, C, and D. So we have these two paths in the this particular project. The duration, if we calculate or compute the duration of both of these paths, then we can see that we have the duration of activity A is 5, activity B is 5, and activity D is 15, which is equal to 5 plus 5 plus 15, which is equal to 25. So you can see that path ABD has a 25 weeks duration. And the duration of A is 5, C is 10, and D is 15. A is 5, C is 10 and D is 15. So it equals to 30. So which one of these two is the critical path? Yes, the path A, C, and D is the critical path because it is the longest path in this particular project. And that means that we should have at least a 30 days in which we need to complete the project. Okay, so you can see this particular legend as well for these different nodes. The we will have at the center we will have a duty name. Here we have duration, early start, early finish, late start, and late finish dates. Okay, so this was the basic of this particular project. Let's discuss the early start and early finish and the late start and late finish durations. So we have to calculate those durations here. As you can see, for activity A, if activity A starts on the first day, day one, then we will have its earliest start is equal to 1. So remember that we can have, the we can start a project with 0 or we can start a project with 1. So this is an example of the project that actually start with 1. We will discuss the project that will start with 0 as well. So you can see the earliest finish date is 5. How? Because if the project start at 1, then okay, 1, it's the project start at day 1. So day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5. So 5 would be the earliest finish because activity A has 5 duration. Okay, so now activity B depends on activity A and it will start on day 6 because the activity A is finished on day 5. So it will start the activity B and activity C will start on day 6 because both of these activities actually depend on the predecessor, which is activity A. Okay, there is a little difference between the projects that actually start with 0 and the project that start with 1. So if you want to find out the earliest finish of of activity in a project that start with 1, that will have a very simple expression we have to follow. So the earliest finish of B is 10. How? Because the duration of B is 5. So and it starts on 6. So day 6, day 7, day 8, day 9, and day 10. So 10 will be the earliest finish. Similarly, the duration of activity C is 10. So, and it starts on 6. So 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 and 10. So which will be equal to 15. Okay. Uh, okay, how to find out the earliest finish? Earliest finish, for example, this is equal to earliest start, which is 1, plus the duration, which is 5. So it will be equal to 6 minus 1. So that will be equal to 5. So earliest finish of each activity can be defined in this manner. Similarly, if you want to find out the earliest finish of activity B, then how we can find it? Okay, earliest start, which is 6, plus duration, which is 5, so it will be 11 minus 1, that will be equal to 10. So we can find the earliest finish of with this expression. Similarly, with this expression, we can find out, the earliest finish of all activities. Okay, now when the B and C completes, the activity D actually depends on both activities, activity B and activity C. Now activity B completes a 10th day on 10th day, and activity C complete on 15th day. So when should we start activity D? we can start activity D on 16. Why? Because we can't start activity D on the 11th day, because we have to wait for activity C to be completed on 15th day. And after completion of activity C, we can start activity D on the 16th day. Okay. So another shortest rule is that you can say, you can find out, if you want to find out the earliest start of this activity, then you will have to select the greater value of earliest finish of the predecessors. So these two are the predecessors of activity D, and the earliest finish of B is 10 and earliest finish of C is 15. So 15 is the greater value. That's why we will have to consider 15. Okay, so if activity C completes on 15th day, then we will start activity D on 16th day. And as you know that this duration is 15, so 15 okay, so 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. So 30 would be the earliest finish of activity D. Okay, so that's how we can find out the earliest start and earliest finish for each activity if we start activity a project on day one. Okay, we will discuss on the next in the coming slides that how to draw how to find out the earliest start and earliest finish of different activities if the project starts on day zero. So this was actually the forward pass. Now, if you have any questions, you can ask me, or you can uh, email me or WhatsApp me, your questions, and I will try to answer those questions as soon as possible. Now, sorry. Okay. Now we have to find out. So that was the forward pass. Let's start with the backward pass. We have to move backward from activity D to activity A, because we need to find out the latest finish and latest start. So the latest finish of the last activity will be equal to the earliest finish, which is 30, because the project will complete at 30th day. So that's why the latest finish would be 30. So we need to find out the earliest latest start. So how can we find it? We will again use another expression here, which is latest finish minus duration of an activity plus 1. So as you know, in the forward direction, for finding out the earliest finish, we have used this formula. Okay, we have to use another formula or expression for finding out the latest start in the backward direction. So latest finish, which is 30, minus duration, which is 15, plus 1. So that will be equal to 30 minus 15 is 15, plus 1 is equal to 16. So 16 would be the latest start of activity D. Now, we will have to, if we want to find out the latest finish of activity B and C, then we will have to minus 1 from this latest start of activity D. So 16 minus 1 is equal to 15. So 15 would be the latest finish of activity B, and 15 would be the latest finish of activity C as well. Now, if you want to find out the latest start of activity B, then again we will use that same expression, which is latest finish minus duration plus 1. So latest finish is 15 minus duration is 5. So that would be equal to 10 plus 1, 6. So plus 1, 11, sorry. So 11 is the latest start of activity B. Now, the latest start, or if you want to find the latest start of activity C, then we will have 15 minus 10, which is equal to 5, plus 1, which is equal to 6. Now, you know the activity A is activity B and C both are dependent on activity A. So, which value of the latest start would be the latest finish of activity A? So, we will select the smallest value, and you know activity B has the latest finish, which is the latest start, which is 11, and activity C has a latest start, which is 6. So 6 is the smallest value. So we will again use the same rule. 6 minus 1, it will be equal to 5. Okay, we'll have to minus the value as we have minus the value here. 16 minus 1, so that was 15. So similarly, we will use 6 minus 1, which is equal to 5. And so 5 is actually the latest finish of activity A. Now, if you want to find out the latest start of activity A, then we will have 5 minus 5 plus 1. So 5 minus 5 is equal to 0 plus 1. So 1 is the latest start. Okay. Now we have another, you can see to the legend, we have one thing left, and that is the total float. If you want to find the total float, then the total float is latest start minus earliest start, or sorry, latest finish minus earliest finish, or um, latest start minus earliest start. Okay, so if we use the latest finish minus earliest finish, so 5 minus 5 is equal to 0. So 0 is the slack or float. Similarly, 15 minus 10, which is equal to 5. 15 minus 5, which is equal to 0. And 30 minus 30, which is equal to 0. So those activities whose slack or float is equal to 0, those activities are called the critical activities, and they lie on the critical path. So we can say that the critical path is A, C, and D. And we have found it here, A, C, and D. Okay. So let me discuss this slide in Urdu. So my Urdu, speaking students understand it easily. ये एक ऐसा प्रोजेक्ट है, मैंने आपको बताया था कि हमारे पास दो किस्म के प्रोजेक्ट हो सकते हैं। एक प्रोजेक्ट यानी एक ही प्रोजेक्ट को हम दो तरीकों से स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं, या तो हम जीरो से वो प्रोजेक्ट स्टार्ट करते हैं या वन से। ये जो एग्जांपल है ये वन का है, ये प्रोजेक्ट वन से स्टार्ट हुआ है। इस प्रोजेक्ट में हमारे पास चार डिफरेंट एक्टिविटीज हैं, एक्टिविटी ए, बी, सी और एक्टिविटी डी। एक्टिविटी ए क्योंकि अगर ये वन पे स्टार्ट हो रहा है तो इसका ड्यूरेशन क्या है, 5 है। सो इसका जो अर्लीस्ट फिनिश, तो इसका जो अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट है वो वन हो जाएगा क्योंकि ये वन पे स्टार्ट हो रहा है, और ये एक इंडिपेंडेंट एक्टिविटी है, ये किसी एक्टिविटी पे डिपेंड नहीं करती। क्योंकि इसका अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट वन है और इसका हमने अर्लीस्ट फिनिश अगर फाइंड करना है तो किस तरह फाइंड करेंगे, यूजिंग दिस एक्सप्रेशन। और वो क्या है कि अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट व्हिच इज 1 प्लस ड्यूरेशन, ड्यूरेशन इज 5, सो 1 प्लस 5 इज 6 माइनस 1, तो ये 5 हो जाएगी। इसी तरह यही एक्सप्रेशन यूज करके आप हर एक के लिए जो है अर्लीस्ट फिनिश यूज कर सकते हैं, जो कि हमने बी के लिए फाइंड की 10, सी के लिए हमने फाइंड की है व्हिच इज 15, डी के लिए फाइंड की है व्हिच इज 30। ठीक है जी। अच्छा, अब यहाँ पे मैं एक रूल आपको समझाना चाहता हूँ कि अगर फॉरवर्ड पास में आप जा रहे हैं, क्योंकि आप अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट और अर्लीस्ट फिनिश फॉरवर्ड पास में फाइंड कर सकते हैं, तो फॉरवर्ड पास में चूंकि अगर हम जाएंगे तो हमारे पास एक ऐसा केस आएगा जो कि हमारे पास बी, सी और डी के फॉर्म में यहाँ पे मौजूद है। अब देखिए, चूंकि एक्टिविटी डी एक्टिविटी बी और सी दोनों पे डिपेंडेंट है, तो अब एक्टिविटी डी का लेटेस्ट जो स्टार्ट है, अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट है सॉरी, वो क्या हो सकता है, तो 10 हो जाए, 10 के बेस पे होना चाहिए या 15 के बेस पे होना चाहिए। तो देखें, चूंकि एक्टिविटी बी तो 10वें दिन पे खत्म हो जाएगी, लेकिन 11वें दिन पे हम एक्टिविटी स्टार्ट नहीं कर सकते, हमें एक्टिविटी सी का वेट करना होगा जब तक एक्टिविटी, क्योंकि रूल ये है कि एक्टिविटी बी और सी दोनों कंप्लीट होंगे तभी हम एक्टिविटी बी स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं। तो अब तो बी तो स्टार्ट हुआ है लेकिन एक्टिविटी सी नहीं, सॉरी बी तो कंप्लीट हुआ है 10वें दिन पे, लेकिन एक्टिविटी सी जो है वो 15वें दिन पे खत्म होना है। तो जब तो हमें 5 दिन वेट करना होगा, जब 15वें दिन पे एक्टिविटी सी खत्म हो जाएगी तो 16वें दिन पे 16 डे पे हम एक्टिविटी को स्टार्ट कर देंगे। और फिर अगेन इसी फार्मूला के थ्रू जो है फिर हम अर्लीस्ट फिनिश फाइंड आउट कर लेते हैं। इसी तरह याद रखें कि लेटेस्ट फिनिश ऑफ द लास्ट एक्टिविटी जो होगी वो इक्वल होगी अर्लीस्ट फिनिश ऑफ दैट एक्टिविटी। तो अर्लीस्ट फिनिश इस एक्टिविटी डी का क्या है 30 है, तो इसका लेटेस्ट फिनिश भी 30 हो जाएगा। अब लेटेस्ट फिनिश के लिए जिस तरह हमने यहाँ पे अर्लीस्ट फिनिश हर एक एक्टिविटी के अर्लीस्ट फिनिश के लिए ये वाला एक्सप्रेशन यूज किया, इसी तरह हम लेटेस्ट फिनिश के लिए थोड़ा दूसरा फॉर्मूला यूज करेंगे और वो तकरीबन सेम होगा लेकिन ये साइंस डिफरेंट हो जाएंगे। यहाँ प्लस की जगह माइनस हो जाएगा, माइनस की जगह प्लस हो जाएगा, ये लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट हो जाएगा और ये लेटेस्ट फिनिश हो जाएगा। तो अगर आपने लेटेस्ट सॉरी ये लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट हो जाएगा और ये लेटेस्ट फिनिश हो जाएगा। तो अगर आपने लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट फाइंड आउट करना है तो क्या होगा, लेटेस्ट फिनिश माइनस ड्यूरेशन प्लस 1। तो लेटेस्ट फिनिश माइनस ड्यूरेशन क्या आ जाएगी 30 माइनस 15 इज इक्वल टू 15 एंड प्लस 1 इज 16। तो 16 आपके पास लेटेस्ट फिनिश स्टार्ट वैल्यू जो है वो ठीक है आपने फाइंड आउट की। अब अगेन वही तरीका है कि अब बैकवर्ड डायरेक्शन में अगर हम जाएंगे तो हम चूंकि ई जो है वो एक्टिविटी बी और सी दोनों पे डिपेंडेंट है, तो हमें फाइंड आउट करना होगा कि कौन सा हमें जो है वो यूज करना है। uh, हम जो है क्या यूज करें लेटेस्ट फिनिश। तो लेटेस्ट फिनिश अगेन दोनों का हम सेम ही यूज करेंगे विच इज 15, क्योंकि 16 से हम 1 माइनस करेंगे। रूल ये है कि 16 माइनस 1 होगा यानी लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट माइनस 1 होगा, तो इससे आपकी जो प्रीवियस एक्टिविटीज है उनकी लेटेस्ट फिनिश आ जाएगी। तो लेटेस्ट फिनिश ऑफ बी एंड सी इज इक्वल टू लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट ऑफ डी माइनस 1। तो लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट ऑफ डी इज 16 एंड माइनस 1, सो 15 आ जाएगा। तो 15 और 15 दोनों ये हो जाएंगे। इसी तरह क्या होगा कि अगर आप इसकी सी का जो लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट फाइंड करना चाहते हैं तो उसके लिए सेम रूल यूज करेंगे जो कि ये है कि लेटेस्ट फिनिश व्हिच इज 15 माइनस ड्यूरेशन व्हिच इज 10। सो 15 minus 10 is 5 plus 1 and plus 1 is 6, so 6 is the latest start। ठीक है, इसी तरह आप बाकी एक्टिविटीज के लिए भी जो है वो लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट इसी तरह फाइंड कर सकते हैं। और टोटल फ्लोट या स्लैक मैंने आपको बात की थी, तो स्लैक के लिए हमारे पास दो फार्मूलाज हो सकते हैं या टोटल फ्लोट के लिए, वो ये है कि लेटेस्ट फिनिश माइनस अर्लीस्ट फिनिश या लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट माइनस अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट। तो दोनों में से किसी एक रूल को आप यूज कर सकते हैं, उस दोनों से सेम ही वैल्यूज आएंगी। अब अगर लेटेस्ट फिनिश से मैं अर्लीस्ट फिनिश माइनस करता हूं तो इससे क्या आ जाएगी, जीरो वैल्यू आ जाएगी, बिकॉज़ 5 माइनस 5 इज इक्वल टू 0। इसी तरह यहाँ से अगर मैं 15 से 10 माइनस करूंगा तो 5 आ जाएगी। इसी तरह अगर मैं 16 से 11 से 6 माइनस करूंगा तो भी 5 आएगा। इसी तरह 1 से 1 माइनस करूंगा तो भी 0 आएगा। ठीक है, अच्छा अब अगर 15 से 15 में माइनस करूँ तो भी 0 आता है, 6 से मैं 6 माइनस करूँ तो भी 0 आता है, अगर 30 से मैं 30 माइनस करूँ तो भी 0 आता है, 16 से मैं 16 माइनस करूँ तो भी 0 आता है। तो याद रखिए वो एक्टिविटी जिनका टोटल फ्लोट 0 बनता है, ठीक है, या स्लैक 0 बनता है, तो वही एक्टिविटीज हमारे पास क्रिटिकल एक्टिविटीज होगी और वो जिस पाथ पे पड़ी होती है हम उसको क्रिटिकल पाथ कहते हैं। तो यहाँ पे क्रिटिकल पाथ क्या हो जाएगा, ए सी और डी, क्योंकि इन तीनों एक्टिविटीज का जो स्टैक या फ्लोट है वो 0 है। ठीक है, सो दैट्स ऑल अबाउट दिस पर्टिकुलर स्लाइड। आई होप you understand this particular slide. Now, other things that we need to discuss in the critical path method is the project network. So, a network diagram is actually a schematic display of the logical relationship among the project activities and their sequencing. Okay, so we, as you know, that we have two different methods. That is activity on arrow, or we call it arrow diagramming method, ADM, and we have another technique that is activity on node, or we call precedence diagramming method, which is PDM. So this method is actually the PDF method or activity on node method because the nodes represent activities. So there are two different project networks we can have. That is activity on arrow diagramming method. In activity on arrow, activities are represented by arrows, and node represent just starting and ending point of activity. And in activity on node or precedence diagramming method that we have discussed in the previous slide, the boxes or nodes represent the activities, while the arrows represent the flow or the relationship among activities. So this is an example of the activity on arrow or arrow diagramming method and activity on node or precedence diagramming method. So you can see here in activity on arrow, that is arrows represent activities, like this arrow represent activity A, this one activity B, this arrow represent activity C, this activity D, this arrow represent activity E, and so on. And in front of each arrow, we have the duration of particular. In front of each activity, sorry, we have duration of that activity. For example, for activity A, duration is 1. Activity B, duration is 2. Activity C, the duration is 3. And same is the case in all the arrows. And this 1, 2, 3, and 4 represent this one represent the starting point of the project. 2 represent the ending point of activity A, but starting point of activity B. E represents the end point of activity B, but it represents the starting point of activity E and F. Okay, so similar is for 5, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now, you can see here that activity on node and precedent diagramming method, as we have discussed in the previous slide. So all the activities are represented by nodes, and arrows just represent the relationship or the flow of the diagram. So this is the basic difference between the activity on arrow and activity on node diagrams or network diagrams. Let's discuss an example of the network diagram. So here at the left side, where you can see the attributes, activity attributes, like in the first column we have activity code, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then activity name, mean name of each activity, So one activity has a name A, another one is B, C, D, E, F, and G. Then we have the durations of each activity. For activity A, duration is 5. For activity B, duration is 6. For activity C, duration is 4. For activity D, duration is 7, and so on. And we have the predecessor activities as well. Key activity A, or predecessor activity for activity A is no one. That means that activity A is the independent activity. Okay, it does not have any predecessor activity, but activity B depends on A, activity C depends on B, activity D depends on B, activity E depends on C, F depends on D and E, and G depends on H. Now at the right side of this slide, you can see the legend. So this is a node. This is an activity node. Okay, you can draw an activity node of different kinds. Like this is one of the kind of activity node. You can draw any particular shape of an activity. So here in this legend, you can see that we have the center represent activity. This is the earliest start. This is the earliest finish of activity A. This is the latest start of activity A. This is the latest finish of activity A. This is the float or slack of activity A. This is the you will write the activity number, and you will write the successor of activity A. Okay, so let's discuss this particular example on the next slide. So here, based on these activity attributes, we have drawn this network diagram. Okay, so for activity A, you can see the duration is 5. So this is the duration of activity A. And here you can see that the activity is started with 0. Sorry, the project is started with 0, not with 1. Okay. So uh, 0 plus 5 would be equal to the, so here the earliest finish can be easily calculated in this particular project, in which the 0 in which project is start with 0. So the earliest finish is equal to earliest start plus duration. So earliest start is 0 plus duration is 5, which is equal to 5. So this would be the earliest finish of activity A. Similarly, the we will have in this particular project in which the earliest start of activity B will be equal to the earliest finish of activity A, okay, which is 5. So we will start project with 5, okay. Because how? Because you can see, if activity A starts from 0, then 0 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so 5 would be the uh, earliest finish of activity A. On the same day, on day 5, we can start activity B, and if its duration is 6, then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So 11 will be its earliest finish. Okay. Now, as you can see here, that there are, for activity C and activity D both depend on B. So we can draw activity C and B here. So the earliest start of activity C and D both will be 11, which is equal to the earliest finish of activity B. Okay. Okay. So the duration of activity C is 4. So 11 plus 4 is equal to 15. And the duration of activity D is 7. So 11 plus 7 is equal to 18. And similarly, you can you can find the earliest start of all those activities and earliest finish as well. Now let's talk about the latest finish. So as I've told you that the rule is, the latest finish of the last activity of the project will be equal to the earliest finish of that activity. So it is 30. So if you want to find the latest start of in the backward direction, then you will have to divide, sorry, minus the duration from the latest finish. Like 30 minus 4, that will be equal to 26. Now 26 will be the latest finish of activity F. So if you want to find the latest start of activity F, then you will have 36 minus 3, which is equal to 23. Now, the 23 will be the latest finish for both of the activities B and E. And you can, similarly go to this particular backward direction. Okay. Now, let me discuss this example again. इस डायग्राम को अगर आप देखें तो ये एक्टिविटी और नोड का डायग्राम है। पिछले स्लाइड्स पे, यानी इन स्लाइड्स पे, सॉरी इस स्लाइड पे हमने एक ऐसे प्रोजेक्ट के बारे में बात की थी कि जिसकी एक्टिविटी जो है, जो प्रोजेक्ट यानी जो पहली एक्टिविटी है वो 1 से स्टार्ट हो रही है। तो उसके लिए ये वाले रूल्स हमने यूज किए थे, अर्लीस्ट फिनिश और अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट, और जो लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट और लेटेस्ट फिनिश के हमने ये वाला फॉर्मूला यूज किया। लेकिन अगर आपका प्रोजेक्ट 0 से स्टार्ट हो रहा है तो फिर वो बहुत ही सिंपल और आसान बन जाता है। उसमें आपको फिर वो रूल्स अप्लाई करने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती। अगर आप इस प्रोजेक्ट को देखें तो यहाँ ये प्रोजेक्ट 0 से स्टार्ट हो रहा है, तो इसका यानी फिर अगर प्रोजेक्ट 0 से स्टार्ट हो रहा है तो फिर हर एक एक्टिविटी की जो अर्लीस्ट फिनिश है वो किस चीज की इक्वल होगी, ड्यूरेशन प्लस अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट। तो ड्यूरेशन जो है यहाँ 5 है, अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट जो है वो 0 है, so 5 plus 0 is 5। ठीक है, और यहाँ पे ये रूल भी नहीं होगा कि आप +1 लगा के दूसरी एक्टिविटी का अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट फाइंड आउट करेंगे। यहाँ पे डायरेक्ट उसी अर्लीस्ट फिनिश जो है प्रीवियस एक्टिविटी का, उसी को आप यूज करते हैं एज द अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट ऑफ द नेक्स्ट एक्टिविटी। यानी एक्टिविटी बी का जो अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट होगा वो एक्टिविटी ए की अर्लीस्ट फिनिश की इक्वल होता है। और फिर इसका अर्लीस्ट एक्टिविटी बी का अर्लीस्ट फिनिश किस चीज की इक्वल होगा, ड्यूरेशन प्लस अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट, सो 5 plus 6 which is 11। ठीक है, इसी तरह अब इस सी का जो अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट है वो अर्लीस्ट फिनिश ऑफ एक्टिविटी बी होगा। तो बी का अर्लीस्ट फिनिश 11 है, तो इसका जो अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट है सी का वो भी 11 हो जाएगा। और इसकी अर्लीस्ट फिनिश क्या हो जाएगी, 15। किस तरह, 11 plus 4 which is 15, यानी ड्यूरेशन प्लस अर्लीस्ट स्टार्ट। तो ये सेम रूट और बड़ा सिंपल रूट जो है वो यूज करते हैं हम उस प्रोजेक्ट में जिसका जो कि 0 से स्टार्ट होता है। इसी तरह अगर आप बैकवर्ड डायरेक्शन में जाएंगे तो फिर आपको एक रूल तो सेम है कि लेटेस्ट फिनिश जो है फाइनल एक्टिविटी का वो इक्वल होगा अर्लीस्ट फिनिश का। तो अर्लीस्ट फिनिश इसका क्या है, 30 है, यहाँ लेटेस्ट फिनिश 30 है। ठीक है, ये रूल जो है ये सेम है दोनों एक्टिविटीज के लिए, चाहे दोनों प्रोजेक्ट के लिए, चाहे वो एक प्रोजेक्ट जो है वो 0 से स्टार्ट हो या 1। ये रूल सेम है कि जो लास्ट एक्टिविटी है जो कि यहाँ जी है उसका जो लेटेस्ट फिनिश होगा वो उसकी अर्लीस्ट फिनिश होगा। लेकिन वहां पे हम एक रूल यूज कर रहे थे, फॉर्मूला यूज कर रहे थे कि लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट आप किस तरह फाइंड करेंगे। यहाँ पे उस फॉर्मूले की जरूरत नहीं होगी, यहाँ पे आप डायरेक्ट कर सकते हैं कि लेटेस्ट फिनिश से आप जो है ड्यूरेशन माइनस करें तो आपके पास लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट आ जाता है। और फिर लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट से आपने उससे 1 माइनस नहीं करना होता जिस तरह आप वहां करते थे। यहाँ तो बस डायरेक्ट आप जो है इसका जो लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट है इस एक्टिविटी जी का वो प्रीवियस एक्टिविटी जो है उसका लेटेस्ट फिनिश हो जाए। और फिर इसका अगर आप लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट फाइंड करना चाहते हैं एफ का तो 26 माइनस 3 आपके पास आ जाएगा। ठीक है जी, तो इसी तरह आप जो है इन तमाम एक्टिविटीज के लिए लेटेस्ट स्टार्ट और लेटेस्ट फिनिश जो है वो फाइंड आउट कर सकते हैं। अब अगर दोनों एक्टिविटीज को आप देखें तो हमारे पास एक जो एक्टिविटी है यानी इन सब की ड्यूरेशन को अगर आप ऐड करें तो वो क्या बनती है, वो 30 बनती है। और इन सब की जो एक्टिविटीज हैं ए बी सी एफ जी इसको ऐड करें तो क्या बनेगी 25। तो दो पार्ट्स बनती है, एक ये वाला पार्ट बनता है, ठीक है, और एक जो है ये वाला पार्ट बनता है। ठीक है, तो इसमें से क्रिटिकल पार्ट कौन सा होगा, ऑब्वियसली वो पार्ट जिसका जो है जो कि लॉन्गेस्ट पार्ट 30। ये क्रिटिकल पार्ट, और ये जो एक्टिविटीज है ए बी सी डी एफ और जी ये क्रिटिकल एक्टिविटीज कहलाती है क्योंकि क्रिटिकल पार्ट के ऊपर मौजूद है। Now this is another example, a very simple example, and this example shows that if you have three different paths, for example, in this particular example, this is the start and this is the finish of this project, and these are the 5 activities, and each activity has the duration like for activity 1 duration is 3, for activity 2 duration is 5, for activity 3 is 7, for activity 4 duration is 2, and for activity 5 duration is 4. Now we have three parts. The first part is this one, the second part is this one, and this is the third part. So we have three parts. Okay, so we need to add the duration of each part. This is the first part, this is the second part, this is the third part. So the duration that is the part that is the longest one, which is 14. So that is the critical part. Examples of network diagram. Another example is this. So यहाँ पे अगर आप देखें, if you see here, then you can see that we have a different type of node, and this is the most simplest node in which we have the activity, its earliest start, earliest finish, latest start, latest finish, and the duration, and the total given in the bottom of each activity. Okay, so this is another example of a network diagram. Now, another tool or a technique that we can use for developing the schedule is the resource optimization technique. So, example of resource optimization techniques that can be used to adjust the schedule model to demand and supply of resources include but are not limited to. The first one is resource leveling. It is a technique in which the start and finish date are adjusted based on the resource constraints, with the goal of balancing demand for resource with the available supply. तो रिसोर्स ऑप्टिमाइजेशन टेक्निक्स की हमारे पास कुछ एग्जांपल्स है, जो कि उसमें से एक हमारे पास है रिसोर्स लेवलिंग। और रिसोर्स लेवलिंग में हम क्या करते हैं कि इसमें एक यानी एक्टिविटीज की जो स्टार्टिंग और फिनिश डेट्स हैं उसको हम रिसोर्स कंस्ट्रेंट्स की बेस पे जो है हम उसको एडजस्ट करते हैं, कम ज्यादा करते हैं। कि अगर रिसोर्सेज हमारे पास कुछ कंस्ट्रेंट हो, वो इसलिए अवेलेबल ना हो या कोई मसला हो, सप्लाई में कोई मसला हो, तो उसकी वजह से हम जो है उसकी स्टार्ट और फिनिश डेट को जो है एडजस्ट करते हैं। दैट इज कॉल्ड रिसोर्स लेवलिंग। And resource leveling can be used when shared or critically required resources are only available at certain times or in limited quantities. तो जिस तरह मैंने आपको बताया कि रिसोर्स लेवलिंग हम तब यूज करते हैं जब हमारे पास रिसोर्सेज अनअवेलेबल हो, रिसोर्सेज की कंस्ट्रेंट्स हो, ठीक है, कुछ हर्डल्स आ रही हो, ठीक है, तो उसकी वजह से फिर हम एक्टिविटीज की जब स्टार्टिंग और फिनिश डेट को एडजस्ट करते हैं, तो दैट इज कॉल्ड रिसोर्स लेवलिंग। एक और हमारे पास another technique or tool that we can use here is the modeling technique. And modeling technique include the what if scenario analysis and simulation. What if scenario analysis is actually the process of evaluating scenarios in order to predict their effect positively or negatively on project objectives. Okay, so a schedule network analysis performed using the schedule to compute the different scenarios. So what if scenario analysis mean कि हम different analysis जो है हम उसको consider करते हैं और हम उन analysis को फिर इवेल्युएट करते हैं, उसकी असेसमेंट करते हैं और प्रेडिक्ट करते हैं कि उन सिनेरियोज का क्या इफेक्ट होगा, पॉजिटिव इफेक्ट होगा हमारे प्रोजेक्ट के ऑब्जेक्टिव्स भी या नेगेटिव इफेक्ट होगा उनके हमारे प्रोजेक्ट की ऑब्जेक्टिव्स। ठीक है, तो हम एक्चुअली व्हाट इज सिनेरियो में एक सिनेरियो को जो है हम उसको डिफरेंट सिनेरियोज जो होते हैं, जो पॉसिबल सिनेरियोज होते हैं, उनको हम एनालाइज करते हैं और उनकी जो पॉजिटिव या नेगेटिव इफेक्ट ऑन द प्रोजेक्ट ऑब्जेक्टिव है उसको हम आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं। The next one is simulation. Simulation involves calculating multiple project durations with different sets of activity assumptions, usually using probability distributions constructed from the three-point estimate to count for uncertainty. तो simulation में हम क्या करते हैं? इसमें हम multiple project durations जो है उसको हम calculate करते हैं based on different activity assumption, यानी different assumptions हम देते हैं एक्टिविटी की और उन assumption की बेस पे हम प्रोजेक्ट ड्यूरेशन को जो है वो कैलकुलेट करते हैं और वो मल्टीपल कैलकुलेशन होती है। यानी फॉर एक्टिविटी ए के लिए अगर हम कुछ assumption ले लेते हैं तो उसके बेस पे हम एक्टिविटी ए के दो तीन प्रोजेक्ट ड्यूरेशन जो है वो कैलकुलेट करते हैं, फिर उसमें से बाद में मतलब जो बेस्ट ड्यूरेशन है उसको हम कंसीडर करते हैं। ठीक है, सो दैट इज द सिमुलेशन प्रोसेस। ठीक है, और जो कॉमन सिमुलेशन टेक्निक that we can use here is the Monte Carlo analysis, in which a distribution of possible activity duration is defined for each activity and used to calculate a distribution of possible outcome for the total project. But we are not going to discuss the Monte Carlo analysis here because that is above your level. Now, leads and lag. If we talk about another tool and technique, then we can have the lead and lag. And you know that we have discussed the lead and lag in details in the previous lectures. So leads and lags are, I'll just go through, this slide of the leads and lags. So leads and lags are refinements applied during the network analysis to develop a viable schedule by adjusting the start time of the successor activities. Leads are used in limited circumstances to advance a successor activity with respect to the predecessor activity. And lags are used in limited circumstances where processes require a set period of time to elapse between the predecessor and successor. So we have discussed leagues and lags with examples in the previous lectures. So I'm not going to discuss it in details here. So scheduling tool is an automated scheduling tool contain the schedule model and expedite the um, scheduling process by generating start and finish dates based on the inputs of activities, network diagram, resources, and activity durations using schedule network analysis. Another one is the another tool and technique that we can use in the project is the schedule compression. Schedule compression techniques are used to shorten the schedule duration without reducing the project scope in order to meet the schedule constraints, imposed dates, and or other schedule objectives. देखिए अगर आप project को if you want to compress the project, if you want to shorten the time of the project or the duration of the project without affecting the objectives of the project, then you have to compress it. And for compressing we use two basic techniques. Okay, अगर आपने किसी प्रोजेक्ट को कंप्रेस करना है यानी प्रोजेक्ट की जो ड्यूरेशन है उसको आपने शॉर्ट करनी है यानी प्रोजेक्ट को आप अगर जल्दी खत्म करना चाहते हैं, ठीक है, तो उसके लिए और आप चाहते हैं कि प्रोजेक्ट भी जल्दी खत्म हो लेकिन प्रोजेक्ट का जो स्कोप है या जो उसके ऑब्जेक्टिव्स है उस पर कोई फर्क ना पड़े, तो फिर हम प्रोजेक्ट क्रैशिंग और फास्ट ट्रैकिंग टेक्निक यूज करते हैं. So one of the technique for using the for schedule compression is the crashing. Crashing is a technique which is used to shorten the schedule duration for the least incremental cost by adding resources. An example of crashing include improving overtime, bringing in additional resources, or paying for expedite delivery to activities on a critical path. So one of the techniques, sorry, that we can use for shortening the duration of project is crashing. In crashing actually we add more resources, okay, to reduce the duration of the project. For example, if the project is constructing a building and if the basic duration in which the building would be constructed is for example 1 year, and if you want to complete it in 10 months, then what you need to do is we need to actually add more labor, more machinery, and more materials. Okay, so we can reduce the duration of that project, that is constructing a building, from 12 months to 10 months. अगर आपने एक बिल्डिंग बनाना है फॉर एग्जांपल वो आप 12 महीने उसका टाइम है, एक साल, ठीक है, और आप चाहते हैं कि उसको 10 महीनों में आप कंप्लीट करें, तो क्या करेंगे, उसको क्रैशिंग करेंगे. क्रैशिंग किस तरह करेंगे उस प्रोजेक्ट की कि आप उसमें ज्यादा रिसोर्स ऐड करेंगे, यानी आप वर्कर्स जो है बढ़ा देंगे. फॉर एग्जांपल अगर पहले 10 वर्कर सॉरी पहले 50 वर्कर उस बिल्डिंग पे काम कर रहे थे तो आप उसको 60 पे कर दें ताकि ज्यादा काम जो है वो जल्दी जल्दी हो सके. इसी तरह जो रिसोर्सेज है, जो आपकी जो मटेरियल्स है उसकी सप्लाई भी आप क्विकली बना दें. सो इस वजह से आपका जो प्रोजेक्ट है वो क्रैश हो सकता है, यानी उसकी जो ड्यूरेशन है वो शॉर्ट कर सकते हैं, 12 महीनों से आप उसको 10 महीनों पे लेके आ सकते हैं. And another technique is the fast tracking technique. So fast tracking technique is a schedule compression technique in which activities or phases normally done in sequence are performed in parallel for at least a portion of the duration. So in fast tracking technique, we actually in this project compression technique, we try to perform the different activities in parallel simultaneously. For example, if you are in a particular project, different activities are performed one after another. For example, activity A has to be performed after completion of activity B has to be performed after the completion of activity A, and activity E is needed to become performed after completion of activity B, and so on. So what you need to do in fast tracking, you will perform different activities in parallel. For example, you will perform both the activity A and B in parallel. We will perform both the activity C and D in parallel in order to reduce the duration of the project. तो अगर फास्ट ट्रैकिंग टेक्निक में ये होता है कि अगर प्रोजेक्ट में आपको एक्टिविटीज सीक्वेंस में करनी होती है कि एक एक्टिविटी आप परफॉर्म करेंगे, उसके बाद आपको दूसरी स्टार्ट करनी होती है, दूसरी परफॉर्म करेंगे, उसके बाद आपको तीसरी एक्टिविटी स्टार्ट करनी होती है। तो उस उस प्रोजेक्ट को अगर हम फास्ट ट्रैकिंग के थ्रू जो है उसकी ड्यूरेशन रिड्यूस करना चाहते हैं, तो हम क्या करेंगे, हम उन एक्टिविटीज को पैरेलल में परफॉर्म करेंगे। ठीक है, यानी साथ साथ परफॉर्म करते रहेंगे ताकि काम जो है वो जल्दी होता रहे। So outputs of the developing schedule include the schedule baseline. Okay, we will wait here for Hassan. Okay. Okay. Outputs of developing schedule process include schedule baseline. The schedule baseline is actually the approved version of the schedule model that can be changed only through formal change control procedures, and it is used as a basis for comparison to actual results. So it is accepted and approved by the appropriate stakeholders as the schedule baseline with baseline start dates and baseline finish dates. Okay, so schedule baseline is actually an approved version of the schedule model, and we can change this. We can do changes in the schedule model um, uh, through the formal change control procedures that we have discussed in, I think, the second or third chapter. Okay, the next one is the project schedule. So obviously, at the end of this developing scheduling process, we will have a project schedule, and the project schedule is an output of the schedule model that presents different activities with planned dates, durations, milestones, and resources. If resource planning is done at an early stage, then the project schedule remains preliminary until resource assignments have been confirmed and scheduled start and finish dates are established. Okay, then we can draw the Gantt charts. We call it the bar chart as well. Okay, and these Gantt charts actually represent the schedule information where activities are listed on the vertical axis, dates are shown on the horizontal axis, and activity durations are shown as the horizontal bars. We have discussed it earlier. Milestone charts are actually these are the similar these are similar to bar chart, but only identify the scheduled start or completion of major deliverables and key external interfaces. And then project schedule network diagram, and these diagrams are commonly presented in activity on node diagram format, showing activities and relationship without a time scale, or presented in a time scale schedule network diagram format. So these are something that we will achieve at the end of the developed schedule model. We will also achieve the schedule data output as well, and the schedule data will include all the data regarding the project schedule model. And actually, based on that particular data, we have made the project schedule model as we have shown in the previous slides examples. Then project calendars. Project calendar identifying the working days and shifts that are available for scheduled activities. Project management plan updates. Obviously, all those documents and plans that are relevant to the schedule will need to be updated. Okay, so we will update those documents as well. So I think that's very simple. We need to move toward the next and the last process of the project schedule management, and that is the controlled schedule. Control schedule is actually the process of monitoring the status of the project activities to update the project's progress and manage changes to the schedule baseline. This process provides the means to recognize deviation from the plan and take corrective and preventive actions, and thus minimize risk. Updating the schedule model requires knowing the actual performance to date. Any change to the schedule baseline can only be approved to the perform integrated change control process. So in control schedule process, we actually monitor the whole status of the project activities. Okay, we monitor the starting and the ending dates. We monitor the where we need to take the corrective and preventive action and to minimize the risk in the project schedule. Okay, so there are some inputs, tools and techniques and outputs of controlled schedule process. So we have discussed all the inputs, that is project management plan, project schedule, work performance data, project calendars, schedule data, organization process. And so all of these inputs have been discussed in the previous lectures. Similarly, we have discussed some of the tools and techniques as well, but let's discuss these tools and techniques again. Performance reviews, okay, that is, one of the basic output tool and techniques that we can use for controlling the schedule of a project. So performance reviews actually measure, it compare and analyze the schedule performance such as actual start and finish dates, percent completion of the activities or project, and remaining duration for work in progress. So we can use different performance review techniques. The first one is trend analysis. Trend analysis examines the project performance over time to determine whether performance is improving or deteriorating. Graphical analysis techniques are valuable for understanding performance to date and for comparison to future performance goals. The critical path method is, that we have discussed. It is used to compare the progress along the critical path, can help determine the schedule status. The variance on the critical path will have a direct impact on the project in date. So these are some of the basic things I think I don't need to explain it here. And another one is the earned value management. So we will discuss the earned value management in the coming a separate chapter. But let's discuss it briefly here. Earned value management is actually it is a technique that we can use for evaluating or assessing the project schedule or the project performance. Okay, we use different performance measurements such as the schedule variance, the schedule performance index, and we use these type of measurements to assess the variation between the original schedule and the actual schedule. Okay, so we can have the project management software. As I told you that we have different softwares and we will try to use those softwares, or I'll try to teach the basics of those softwares in the last week or the last 2 weeks each other. Then we can have the resource optimization techniques. These involve scheduling of activities and the resources that are required by those activities while taking into consideration both the resource availability and project time. Then we have the modeling techniques, and these modeling techniques are actually used to review various scenarios that are guided by risk monitoring to bring the schedule model into alignment with the project management plan and baselines. We have discussed the leads and lags and the schedule compression and scheduling tool in the previous slides, so we are not going to discuss it here again. Okay, the outputs that we will achieve in control schedule is the work performance information. Obviously, we will achieve the work performance information using different, schedule variance and schedule performance indicator, uh, measurements for work breakdown social components, in particular the work packages and support accounts. Schedule forecasts. Schedule forecasts are actually updated and reissued based on work performance information provided as the information is based on the project's past performance and expected future performance. Okay, and the change request. So again, we have discussed the change request. We are not going to discuss this change request again here because we have discussed it many times in the previous lectures. Other outputs includes again the same thing like project management plan updates, project document updates, and organizational process assets updates. Okay, so we have to update the plan and the documents and organization process assets, based on the schedule model. And at the end of schedule management, we should have the project file, and the project file should include these basic informations. The file should include the information regarding these different attributes that you can see on the screen right now. Okay, so that's the end of the process, the project schedule management, and we have discussed how to estimate the activity duration processes, how to estimate the activity duration. We have discussed its process, inputs, tools, and techniques, and outputs. We have discussed what is develop project schedule process, its inputs, tools, and techniques, and outputs. Then we have discussed what actually a project network is. We have discussed the activity on arrow activity on nodes and different types, and we have discussed what actually the CPM is. We have used different examples and identified the critical paths. And what is the control schedule process and what are its inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs? Okay, before leaving this lecture, I would like to tell you that I think it is much better and much easier for a student to consider the project and start it with the zero. Okay, not with one. If you start a project with zero, then it becomes very easy for you to identify the earliest start and earliest finish and the latest start and latest finish dates. Okay, so I'll recommend that particular type of project for you. Okay, so that's the end of the chapter. Now, if you have any question, you can email me, you can WhatsApp me, and please like the and follow the Learn with Wasim Facebook page, and also subscribe the YouTube channel with name Learn with Wasim, and you have press the bell icon as well. Thank you. I hope you have understood this particular lecture. Inshallah, in